Welcome to our troubleshooting session on invoice rejections. We'll go ahead and get started with just a few tips, and then we'll review some cases as well. Regarding invoice rejections, customers will occasionally say, "My invoice was rejected," but really they meant they had a file error. So it's best to ask for clarification on whether the invoice status is showing as rejected or if they have a file error. It's also very helpful if we can ask them if they have a rejected invoice, if we can ask them for a PDF of their invoice from Collaborati. And we do actually have some documentation in MindTouch about that. We actually have two articles on this. One is in the Law Track folder, and this is how to share a printable view of the rejected invoice with the instructions, and also some other tips from the Collaborati Solutions folder. So this just gives some information on how to send a PDF of the invoice from Collaborati to your client. And you just click on Invoices in the top menu bar, find the rejected invoice, click on the invoice number. On the invoice details page, you will look for the words printable view, click on that link. That opens a pop-up window with the invoice, and then you can right-click and choose Save Page As or Save Option to save the invoice as a PDF. So it is best to ask for some clarification regarding the rejected invoice. And then also, just to note, invoices can be rejected by rules in Team Connect or the ELM, or they could be rejected by a user who reviews the invoice in Team Connect. On rare occasions, there could be a technical problem that rejects the invoice when it gets to Team Connect. So we'll look at a few cases now. All right, so this one came to us. "Hi, please advise what the errors are." And then it does say in the subject line, "Deutsche Bank has rejected your invoice." And here's actually this is the email notification that is sent to users who opt in, and it has the comments that are left in the rejection comments from the client on the invoice. So it says, "This invoice was rejected for exception description, the object TF document, blah, 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 author date equals null, checked in on equals null, checked out on equals null." So you can see there's a bunch of nulls in here, but we do see like some keywords: exception description, the object TF document. And then at the bottom it says cannot be updated because it has been changed or deleted since it was last read. We still aren't quite sure what causes this particular issue. However, we do have some information in the Success Center in MindTouch about this. Now, this is an internal document, and the invoice, so this is right here in the gray box, is a note about what the rejection looks like. So if it's got keywords exception description, if it says TF document, if it says a bunch of nulls on there, cannot be updated because it was changed or deleted since it was last read, then the response would be the message to your invoice looks to be what is called an optimistic lock, which occurs while the data on your client system is going through the sync process and is corrupted with other data. Please upload the invoice again, as we need to see it if it goes through into Team Connect or if it gets rejected. If it gets rejected again, I'll need to escalate this issue to our Team Connect support group, as there would be something in the code coming from Team Connect, which is the system that the client uses. So let's see how the response goes. All right, this rejected. You should submit the invoices again if it gets rejected. I'll need to If it gets rejected again, we'll need to escalate this issue to our Team Connect support team. So it looks like he copied and summarized the response from the MindTouch article. And then we closed out the ticket. Set optimistic lock solution. All right. So basically, users ask the vendor to resubmit. Every time it seems to work. I did have an issue where it didn't work. It gave the same rejection like 3 times, and then finally, like the next week, it worked. I don't know why that was, but it persisted for a little bit of time, and those cases can get tricky because in order to investigate further, we'll need the logs from Team Connect support, and the vendors don't have that. Those can get kind of tricky if we want to investigate further. All right, let's go on. If possible, provide a solution to the invoice rejection, or if it is not possible, refer the vendor to contact the client. The client also might ask us questions about an invoice. So this looks like it came from CNA. Can you please look into the referenced invoice? It sounds like the firm may have entered the wrong date for line item 14. We want to see if the date is being entered wrong in Collaborati, and that's why it's showing up like this in Team Connect, or if there's something that's getting messed up during the sync. Thanks, Kevin Mott. All right, hello Kevin. I checked in Collaborati in the database. The database indicates the date on one of the lines is December 30th. The year is 0216. The invoice appears to have been manually created in Collaborati. I would suggest that CNA reject or discount the line item with a comment about the date, or reject the invoice and leave a comment about the date. All right, follow up. I forwarded the info to Danielle. You can close the case. So in this particular case, CNA was asking the question, and we left some comments about that. So in order to do the database query, you'll need somebody, a tier 3 or manager. All right. So yes, sometimes the client asks us about helping with the invoice, even though they're not the ones that are actually submitting it. All right, next. So the next group of cases we'll look at are going to be revolving around invoices that are rejected by rules. Can someone please help Karen on the below rejection notice? She's been trying to submit invoices that keep getting rejected, although they are reconciled. There is more than one invoice being rejected for the same error. It says this invoice was rejected for submitted total should be equal to the original total of the line items. It looks like all my emails are gone, but it says the comments say that we looked at the invoice history and we found out when it was uploaded. And then here's the observations we made. All the rates are rounded to the nearest dollar. We must have asked them for a PDF of the invoice. All the rates are rounded to the nearest dollar. The hours are billed in tenths of an hour, so the problem is not related to rounding issues. There is a fee adjustment line which adds a discount to all the fee lines, the IF line, but this also does not cause any rounding issues. There seems to be a rule in Sempra's system that seems to have checked the invoice and automatically rejected it. Are you able to check with your technical team to find out what the rule is checking? I was wondering if it was checking the discounts on the line items caused by the IF line. It doesn't look like I got any more information, except that they were able to successfully upload the invoice because it says client retrieved invoice in the invoice history. That would indicate to us that it was not rejected by a rule in Team Connect. Vendor says appears that the issue has been resolved and the vendor was able to resubmit those invoices. Okay, so just a few tips if you're logged into if you're investigating an issue and you're trying to find out about the invoices, sometimes you can go to, if the vendor can see the invoice history here, so that would show like if you can search by the invoice number or something here, and this would show information about when the invoice was created, if it was created manually, and if the client retrieved the invoice or if the invoice was rejected. Now, likely if it was created manually and then the client retrieved it and then it was rejected, then that's going to indicate that the client rejected it after it came into the system, so we call that a manual rejection. Sometimes the invoice will be created or uploaded and then the next event history would show invoice rejected. And so because it's not going to the client retrieved invoice for processing, then we know that it was rejected by a rule. Now that is true for Team Connect clients. It's sometimes true for ELM clients, but maybe not always. So that might need to be something that's tested further just so that we get clarification. Now there used to be a problem with the invoices that were rejected by LawTrack, for example, would not show. If they were rejected by a rule in LawTrack, they would not show this event history here, the one where the invoice is rejected. This is the MindTouch article for invoice rejected for null or system error occurred. This indicates a technical error occurred during the time that the invoice was retrieved by the client system. The client system did not know how to process the invoice and thus it was rejected. It's difficult to find information from the Collaborati side to indicate the reason behind the error. Moving on. The invoice was rejected for the vendor Ackerman Centerfit. For a service date, invoice period on the line items is outside the billing period of the invoice. Please find the attached leads file sent by the vendor. So we do actually have a new article about the invoice date. The line item dates must be between the billing start and end dates. There were 3 dates on the fields on the invoice. Some clients require that the line item dates must be within the invoice period, also called the billing start date and billing end date. So here's the invoice period on the top right. It's February 1st to February 21st. And the line item date shows within the period, so it's between 2/1 and 2/21. And the invoice date is over here on the left. invoice date occurs after the period, but needs to be today or in the past, not in the future. Don't put it in a future date. We've reviewed the file. It looks like line item, this number has a date, line item date of 2016, which is outside the period, which is, the period is in 2017. Please correct the file and resubmit. Let me know if you have any questions. Sometimes the expenses are like this. They'll just put the dates, the expenses as like, those were expensed today, and that's not quite how the rule works. So just a little clarification helps. Then a follow-up email, and then she said, I was able to make the change and the invoice went through approved. Thanks. All right, so on this one, this looks like it's from Citgo. Please see the thread below. Advise if there's any flags or errors which will appear if there are discrepancies with the invoices submitted, and to avoid these types of delays for payment. Let's see if we can see the screenshots. No. Potential duplicate expense. 849075, 849037, 849048. Citgo wants us to tell them if there's any flags or errors which will appear if there are discrepancies with the invoices, so that they can avoid the delays. Thank you for your inquiry. Collaborati does not validate line items against other line items. The invoice validation rules will check to see if there is a duplicate invoice number. There is also limited date checking too. The main things that are checked are that the required fields are entered and the matters available and the timekeepers are authorized and the codes are available. So there isn't any information about if the line item is a duplicate. Can we incorporate some of the feedback I am provided in my original email towards future development? The law firm was surprised that nothing warned or flagged them about the data entry discrepancies. I can submit this as an enhancement request for a future version of Collaborati. Unfortunately, I don't think this type of validation will work like it does in Team Connect. Collaborati is designed to be a temporary transport of data between client and vendor, so invoices are deleted periodically from the system. If the invoices are deleted, then it would be difficult to validate across invoices that the line items are not found in other invoices because the invoices had been deleted. Team Connect keeps the invoices, so it is possible to validate this information. And then I submitted an enhancement request. Thank you, Tracy. Is this related to errors by the person? Or the billing year is different from the line items? Oh, this sounds like another question. There are some duplicate lines, and Team Connect throws a warning if the line item matches a line from a different invoice. All right. And it looks like she was happy with that response. Okay, and we have another one here. All right, and here's another ticket. Janine says, okay, so Aerojet is the client here. I cannot see these invoices since they were rejected. However, here is what I do know. If the expense amount was higher than the timekeeper's hourly rate, it will be rejected. I am told you should create a timekeeper for expenses so that does not occur. Also, it looks like this particular invoice, there is a charge for word processing that is typically an item we do not pay for. The 4 invoice has been rejected using task code L20 as well as expense codes. Okay, so here we're asking, hey, would you send us a PDF of the rejected invoice so we can see the rejection message fully instead of the summary. Here's I've attached a PDF of the rejected invoice. Below I have a screenshot showing the rejected invoice numbers. All were rejected for the same reason. So you can see here, these are the rejection comments. And here's a list of her invoices. So on here you can see there's 54 unapproved rate codes, and there's probably about 54 line items. Let's see. I can't tell how many line items there are. All right, the rejection seems to indicate that the line items were submitted with unapproved rate codes. Here are some possible solutions. Have you submitted rates? Have you submitted them for the future fiscal year? If your invoice billing period spans more than 1 fiscal year, you would need to have rates for both of those years then. And then we followed up. And then she said, I'll look into it later. All right, looking into it later. We have not heard back from you. We'd like to close out this case. The issue is not resolved. I just didn't get a chance to do it. I will desperately try to do so tomorrow. Let me close some of these windows. Here. Okay, so here we are again. Could you please provide further details? It appears, let's see. When I enter the timekeepers in Collaborati, am I supposed to be entering their rates as well? If so, where and how do I submit the attorney rates for the client's approval? All right, so we've attached some information about the rate request. If the rate cards are not matter level rates, simply skip the step to add the matter from the matter dropdown. I was able to add the attorney rate codes. Janine is in the process of approving them. Hopefully they will not be rejected again. I approved the rates. All right, bills have been submitted. Have a great evening. They're all pending client approval. So pending client approval means that they've gone through the initial validations and they were picked up by the client system. So hopefully that means they'll be approved. All right, we can close out the ticket. Okay, so that was some case review. So just a few other tips. Collaborati does not reject the invoices. Team Connect or the ELM rejects the invoices. Collaborati can only throw a file error. It cannot actually change the status to rejected. All right. Vendors often ask us to look at their invoice. Maybe they'll call up and say, hey, can you look at my invoice 123? I have a question. And then we have to tell them, no, we can't see your invoice. But instead of saying no, we should say, we can't see the invoice because the details are considered confidential between the client and the vendor. So that makes it sound like it's a good thing instead of a bad thing. We also have some additional information in our client notes. We have some notes about clients. So in this column right here, this is the total fees invoices column. So if the client, we know for sure that the client accepts invoices with the item type total fees. That means that they've configured it on the Team Connect side and they accept it in Collaborati. Then we put a note here, yes. So it looks like American Electric Power accepts total fee invoices for accruals, because there's a little asterisk and it says this only used to be for an accrual. Apple does not allow for total fees except with special permission. Behringer does accept total fee invoices. BAT does not accept total fee invoices. Chesapeake, no. Chevron, no. Cisco, yes. They will allow you to enter a total fees type invoice. Now, if you wanted to create a total fee invoice, you would go over here. You can only do this manually. You'll select your matter and then total fees. You can enter the date. Hopefully your date is within the invoice period. And then you can put in your flat fee amount. And then it will appear like this. So there it is. You've got your description. Notice that there's no code in the description box here. There's no timekeeper. There's no rate. There's no hours. There's a 0 discount, and there's your fee. So basically all you've done is you've entered the matter, date, description, and total. You can tell that it's a total fee because it's in the fee summary box and not the expense summary box. Now, if you do create a total fee, you're not able to add additional fees. See, I can't add an additional fee. Let's see, client notes also have a few other items. Sometimes there might be some additional notes about if the client needs special information on their invoice, that might be on the client notes as well. Pfizer does not allow total fees, but they might accept total expenses, but our documentation doesn't say that. It's still not advisable. If they need to submit a VAT, they'll use E125. They only accept monthly invoices. They're in a clustered Team Connect environment. These are all notes that maybe we can use to help people, but maybe we don't have notes for every client. Only if we get enough questions do we add that information onto the client notes page. We also have some LawTrack invoice rejection tips. Check out the tips attached to this article. Process to complete setup for new vendor. We've got a tips page, then we send this out to all the new vendors. You can send it out to existing vendors, but their client has to be using LawTrack, so it does have some suggestions for rate requests. It should match the client's fiscal year. Guidelines for invoices, numbers, reviewing your invoice rejection. Click here. Click on the invoice number in Collaborati to review the details. And here's some common rejection reasons. Here's the unapproved rate codes and the expense line items must use timekeeper expense line items. What does that mean? That means that the timekeeper needs to be added to the expense lines. It's recommended that a new timekeeper is created with the name expense timekeeper and the timekeeper ID of ET. Most firms have an expense timekeeper with a high rate, such as $1,000 per hour. That would cover most of the expenses. And then a few minor issues too. We also have some billing guidelines for some of the clients, and you can see, for example, Google has actually put their billing information online. They've made this available, and it's an open website, so you can look on here and find out information like if my invoice was rejected. So here's some common rejection reasons. And they have some other information about budgets and matters and timekeepers too. Additionally, we also have this information in SharePoint. For example, Viacom, they have several rules that the invoices need to adhere to. We have those here. So this is in the e-billing folder in SharePoint under support team. In the Collaborati training folder, we have a billing guidelines folder. In here we have information about Viacom's billing guidelines. That concludes our session on invoice rejection troubleshooting.